Welcome to We Can Talk About That, a Christos Community Church podcast that dives into difficult or uncomfortable topics that impact today's church. All right, welcome to the first edition of We Can Talk About That, presented by Christos Community Church. My name is Matt McNair, and joined here by the pastor of Christos, Alex Villasana.
Hola a todos. Hello, everyone. Yes.
Thank you for joining us. Today, we are going to talk about persecution in the U.S. So, Alex, a few weeks ago, you mentioned religious persecution in your sermon. I think the broader context was that you've seen some signs of Christians in America who feel that the capital C church is under persecution. And you were challenging that claim and saying that we are actually quite blessed as Christians living in the States.
Yes.
So I wanted to take a closer look at this topic. What do you think about it?
Well, just to set the context, unfortunately, I think that often because of political reasons, because of my political views, I tend to, I don't want to use that word exaggerate, but because I'm a Christian, because I have this political view, I have the tendency to spiritualize everything that is happening in a bad way, So if there is a certain opposition to my points of view, because I'm a Christian and because I sense that opposition, often I qualify that as quote unquote persecution, when my opinion is that's not persecution necessarily. So if I have a bad time at the bank, I go to the bank and they mistreat me in the bank, and say, oh, sure, it's because I'm a Christian, right? And then I'm being persecuted by this institution. Or I get bad customer service, and it's because I'm a Christian, then this is persecution. My issue with that is that kind of attitude, my opinion, it diminishes the idea of persecution. We have brothers and sisters right now in other parts of the world that are being persecuted, but they are really suffering persecution. Here in the States, my opinion is that it's not at that level yet. There may be some, I'm going to say, opposition to Christian ideas. There may be some, what is the word I'm looking for? Suspicious. If I say I'm a Christian, people may have this idea, I'm a radical or I'm a fundamentalist, or, I have a very narrow view of things, but that is, I'm going to call it opposition or disagreement, but not necessarily persecution. So that was the context of my comment during the sermon.
Awesome. Well, I think that sets the stage quite well for us, and it leads into our first question, which is, let's start with definition. What is persecution?
Well, persecution, I consider that I'm going to use that word, formal opposition against Christianity, very, very specifically. Well, let me one step back. Persecution is a formal opposition to any particular idea, and there is a systematic opposition to whatever you may represent, and so you may be persecuted because of your political views, your religious views, of gender, or whatever defines you. There can be systematic opposition to that. In that way, or with that definition, racism, it's a way of persecution. You are systematically opposing somebody because of their race. So it falls into that. It's not exclusive to religious views. So it's a systematic opposition to the point of not only disagreement, but to hurt somebody, to cause damage,
right? Like
to the other person.
Not hire somebody for a job they're qualified for because of something like that, or
yes, yeah, or doing something that will harm this person physically or emotionally, or in this case financially. But that is my intention. My intention is for you to suffer because I think that you don't deserve certain things
Right.
because of who you are. That is persecution.
Right. So that's like intentional harm done
Mhm.
because of a specific trait about a person. Uh,
Exactly.
and so that's obviously like individual to individual kind of persecution. But there's also this
Mhm.
idea of official, or let's call it state persecution.
Yes, yeah, and here I want to make a distinction. You can have, let's call it, social persecution, and that social persecution or community persecution, that can be systematic. Systematic, it means that we all agree this is okay.
So like
Um,
the majority of a society kind of makes this decision. Yeah.
yeah, but it's not coded in the law
Hmm.
necessarily. But we all say, everyone with a blue shirt, like the one you're wearing right now, everyone with a blue shirt, yeah, they don't deserve this thing. So, um, but if it's coded, or if it is codified, I think that's the right term,
Hmm.
in the law system, then now you have official persecution. Now it's sanctioned, promoted, encouraged by the government. That is a
Hmm.
big jump, like what we saw with Hitler, or in Russia, or the Soviet, Stalin, and other places in Africa and Asia, where the law, or what we had here in the States, way back then, before the civil rights movement, where the law said a person, an African American person, is just 1/3 of a person, things like that. It is coded in our system, in our law. And or when Rome, when Nero, um, there was official persecution. They said Christians deserve to die,
Mm.
and it's in the law. It's right there. It's not only sanctioned by or allowed by the government, it's promoted, it's encouraged. It's like, yeah, we're gonna go and kill all the Jews, for instance, like Hitler. What was the term? The ultimate solution, or the last resort, something like that. There
I
was
think,
a
yeah, something like that. I don't recall the appropriate
Yeah, there was
terminology,
like
but
a
yeah.
specific term they used, like we're gonna eradicate the Jews in Germany or in the world.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that is
um,
official government
yes,
policy persecution.
exactly. Now, in that regard, again, here in the States, we may have social persecution, like there are instances of racism,
Sure.
uh, but and even some government officials may look in the other direction when it's happening. But our laws have been changing, and they're not perfect, but they have been changing. So if somebody right now, the law says that if I get discriminated against because I'm a Christian, I have a case. I can go to the court of law and say, hey, this person mistreated me because I'm a Christian. Uh, it may not work, or I don't know, but at least it's in the law. There are other places where that's not the case. So again, that will be official persecution, what is codified in the law of the land.
That's really good. I'm going to jump around in some of our questions here, but
Sure,
so,
go
so
ahead.
let's talk a little bit about like what are some of the things that you think American Christians see as persecution, and do you view them as persecution or inconvenience, or some mixture of the two?
Yeah. Yeah, no, my opinion again is that it's more inconvenient for me. It's a little, what is the word again? Exasperating. It's a little uncomfortable. It
Hmm.
is, but I wouldn't qualify it as persecution. Like nobody's looking for me because I'm a Christian. Um,
Hmm.
but sometimes my opinions are not popular. There's a rejection and an opposition again, and it makes me feel bad. But it's not persecution.
Hmm.
It's not. And uh, honestly, sometimes I think we do deserve that. We have a bad reputation. Let me say that. As Christians, there's a bad reputation. We think that everyone should like us because we're Christians, but we know what a Christian is. But other people, they have a different opinion of what it is. And then there's this conflict or confrontation, and I feel bad about it. And and I, oh, I'm being persecuted. I don't think that's the case. Recently, we spent a couple of days in North Georgia, in a town that will remain nameless.
Nameless.
And yeah, and the whole transaction, we rented a cabin and whatnot, and the whole transaction was online. So I never had an interaction with the person or the people in charge. So we make it to the cabin, and there were some issues at the cabin, and I thought, tomorrow morning I'm going to go to the office and I will tell them, because I don't want them to think that I broke these things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always concerned about that. Like, they're going to think that I broke it. So next day in the morning, we're getting ready to leave the cabin, going to the nearby town. So I stop by the office, and I walk into the office, open the door, and there's this dog that comes and greets me. And I turn around, and the person in charge is right there. And the facial expression of the person really told me, I mean, the person was surprised to see me.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she asked me the question, like, what can I do for you, was very aggressive.
Mm.
The whole attitude was almost that's what I felt, that she thought that I had no business being in her office.
Right.
And I said, well, we're staying in this cabin. And then her face changed a little, but still, I mean, anyway, and it made me a little uncomfortable. Now, I can say, look, that's racism,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's because my skin is dark, I look weird, and she hates Hispanics. I can say that. But the truth is, I mean, not the truth, but what I think, I'm in a town where 99% of the people is not like me.
Mm-hmm.
They look completely different. And sometimes I forget that. Sometimes I think I look differently. So it is inconvenient, it's uncomfortable. Yeah. Is that racism? Is that persecution? I don't think so. I think it's just I will have reacted the same way if I were in Mexico. Everyone, almost everyone looks the same, and then all of a sudden here comes somebody who looks differently. I will have almost the same reaction. So that's what I'm trying to draw a line between. There are things here in the state that are inconvenient, yes, and uncomfortable, yes, but that doesn't qualify, in my opinion, to the level of being persecuted because you're a Christian.
And to some extent, it sounds like you're talking about, like, there's a difference between lack of familiarity with people of different backgrounds or whatever, and systemically trying to do harm to those people.
Absolutely, and as Christians, we may come across as not caring for people or being insensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Often, and I think it's not a Christian issue. I think it's a human issue. When you start making a comment, you talk about your experience and your universe. You see it from your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes humility to think about the person you're talking to, and that person may have a different experience, and maybe what you're saying may create some friction, may come across as, again, that you're not being sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
Which is again something that I've been talking about a lot with people on my political team. That's the reason we come across we Republicans, we say something like, we champion the idea of individual responsibility, right? And we often say, oh, if you're poor, it's because you don't want to work.
Mm-hmm.
But that is so comfortable for me to say because I'm part of the middle class and
Mm-hmm.
I have the means to produce wealth for my family. And when I see somebody else that is not at the same level, I default to, oh, it's because you're lazy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because this is the land of opportunity. If you want to be rich, you just need to decide, to be rich and tomorrow you can have $1 million, which is a fallacy. That is not
Right.
true. It doesn't work like that. And I don't know the other person. I don't know the other person's story. I
Right.
don't know what has gone. And then I come across as insensitive. The
Yeah.
other person reacts. I react to his reaction, and it goes downhill from there. And I conclude, oh, yeah, it is a persecution or is racism or whatever. It is a human problem. I think it happens with humans. We have the tendency to begin our argument based on my own experience.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting there. Like the thought that came to mind while you were talking is we almost expect our interactions with other people to be frictionless, but
Mm-hmm.
there's no way that that's ever going to be the case.
No, and that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because nowadays emotions have become almost the guidelines.
Yeah.
I expect to feel good in our conversations. Any friction, right away, my flag to go up, like, oh no, this shouldn't be happening. We all should get along, and no, it's that is not reality. But I think now we're giving emotions, like how I feel, such a premium, uh, such a high value, and then it goes from I'm feeling okay to then, oh, then this is terrible. It's the end of things, and yeah,
Well, yeah,
it goes
and
from one extreme to the other.
right. Well, and it just it reminds me of a very famous scripture that says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another."
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
friction is very much involved in that process of
absolutely.
sharpening iron or sharpening ourselves and sharpening each other. So we should expect, we should go into interactions basically expecting some amount of friction and trusting that the process is going to produce positive results. So,
And even that, let me push the envelope a little bit more. Um, we should look for that.
hmm,
We should expect it, but I think we should look for it. And let me just explain this here. Not that we're looking for trouble, right? Like I go out and then start saying things that I shouldn't.
right.
That's not what I'm saying. But in my mind, it comes back to the idea of like ancient Greek or ancient Greece when they have the games, that became the Olympics. Um, and if I remember correctly, the word competitor, like you're my competitor, we're competing. Um, the original idea is that actually your presence helps me to improve. That's the meaning behind that word of being of a competition. It means that your contribution to this competition uh, helps me to improve.
Hmm.
Like in a race, like I want to run with people that are a little better than myself, so I can improve. And that was the idea of the games of this improvement because of mutual participation, but only one can win. So I may not win this time. I I may not win next time, but again, is that constant participation, that friction, that
Hmm.
sharpening, mutual sharpening, that improves my position. So I think we should look for that. I enjoy talking to people. I really do. I enjoy having exchange with somebody of different opinion than myself, than I. As long as we follow certain rules, for
Right. Yeah.
civics, and we're not gonna start punching each other, things like that.
Yeah.
Respect
Yeah, you maintain
overall.
mutual respect for each other. So I'm going to shift
Yes.
gears a little bit here, and for the sake of time, I'm going to skip over a couple of our
Yeah.
questions that we had. But
Okay.
um, we talked about as we prepared for this, it could happen here, right? At some point, there
Yes.
could be
Yeah.
widespread social persecution. There could,
Yes.
I think it would be very impossible based upon the foundation of our country for us to have official persecution, but it could happen. Um,
Yeah.
how should we, as Christians, be prepared? How should we prepare ourselves for facing those types of realities? Um, and then also, you saw a connection with the end times here. And so, if you could kind of talk about how we prepare for that and how you see a connection with the end times. I think that would be a great way for us to kind of wrap up the topic.
Perfect. Let me begin with the end times. There are, well, first of all, the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, to which we are part of that denomination, we don't have an official position in terms of the end times. There are some like minimal requirements that we say, okay, as long as you believe this, then you're in alignment. So we talk about a second coming, the kingdom, and these things. At the end, the Lord wins. That's what we all agree. How that's going to happen, that when we have different positions, and there are at least, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 main views of the end times.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is very popular, talks about the Great Tribulation, the rapture. That position was made very popular by that series of books, Left Behind.
Right.
And we call that dispensationalist. I cannot pronounce it. Dispensacionalista is in Spanish. So
well, you can't pronounce it. I don't even know all these words. So
okay, so it is that is the official position of many of our brothers and sisters, for instance, in the Baptist Church or the Pentecostal Church.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally, I do believe in what is, or I am, what is called a millennialist, a historical millennialist, which means this. A millennialist means that I don't believe that there will be exactly 1,000 years, a millennium, 1,000 years, as it's presented in the book of Revelation.
Mm-hmm.
We believe that that term, 1,000 years, means a long time, not exactly 1,000 years. So
okay.
it's a way to describe a very long period of time, not necessarily 10 centuries. So I'm a millennialist in that regard. Historic millennialist, we believe that the end times actually began in the year, what is it, 40 something, I'm running a blank here, when the destruction of the temple,
yeah,
that happened after the ascension of the Lord Jesus Christ by the Romans. That was the inauguration of the end times. So
interesting.
My personal belief is that we are ready in the end times. The second coming could happen at any time. So now that big context back to the question. So how do we get ready? First of all, I think that we Christians, we need to live knowing that eternity is around the corner. That's what we all agree on. Regardless of your position of end times, we all agree that the clock is ticking. It's coming down, 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 down. So we are closer to that day. Mm-hmm. And we need to live with that idea that eternity could come in now. Boom. Mm-hmm. And so that's one way of being ready to enter. We must be ready to enter into eternity. But also, I think that we need to be aware that things are going to go downhill from here. It's getting gradually worse, 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 worse. That is important because often as Christians, we get involved in things like, what is the word? It's a very popular word that is being used now in Christian circles, the flourishing, mm-hmm. Flourishing. It's a very popular word nowadays. And we work towards justice and improving our communities. And I think we should do that, but never with the idea that we're staying here. And it comes to mind when the Lord sent people to Babylon, and then he sent a letter with the prophet Jeremiah, and the Lord said, look, you have some prophets saying that this is going to last just a couple of years. That's not the case. You guys are staying here for a very long time. However, you're going to come back to Jerusalem. In the meantime, you need to get ready. You need to prepare. You need to plan gardens, you need to get married, get involved, and also pray for the city where you are. So I think that encapsulates very well our attitude. We should be very concerned about the here and now, but knowing that eternity is coming. I'm doing this not because this is my place to stay. I'm doing this being engaged with life so that I can testify that eternity is coming.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way. Oops, sorry. I think that's the way we need to be prepared. That's the way we can get ready. I'm not of the idea of going buying a piece of land in, again, North Georgia or Tennessee and make a bunker and stay there until the Lord comes. I think our way to be prepared is, one, be aware it's coming. Things are going to get increasingly worse. But two, remain engaged.
Mm-hmm.
Help your fellow men. Be a blessing for your community. I think it's also that's a way to be ready for that time.
And how do you how do you think that we could prepare our hearts? Like, should individual persecution come towards us? Like, how should we be ready to deal with an instance of somebody intentionally trying to do harm because we believe in Jesus and the gospel?
That's a good question. And it's going to sound simplistic, but I think that we Christians, we should be getting good. That's not a good way to say it, but I think we should strive to faithfully practice spiritual disciplines individually and with our family.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, the spiritual discipline of worship or prayer or meditation in God's word, we need to get better and better in those practices because, and I'm not saying that the pandemic is a sign of the end times. However, if we have learned something about Christian life or the church, excuse me, is that it only takes a pandemic to disrupt our weekly gatherings.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm dependent on my weekly gatherings, and those are taken away because of pandemic or because of the law, I'm going to have to rely more on my own resources, my own worship, excuse me, worshiping with my family. So I think we need to be prepared to be, in a way, self-sufficient with our spiritual practices because we need to meditate, we need to consider where we're going. And it's hard for me to say, excuse me, because when it comes, it's easy for me to say it now because I'm not suffering.
Right.
Like, yeah, you should learn to love the Lord more than your own life. How do you do that? That is mind-boggling. It's like, how?
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I insist. If we constantly meditate on His Word, if we practice these spiritual disciplines, if we practice loving one another, I think that's the way that is going to get us ready. It's not going to be pain-free. That I can guarantee you. There is nothing that will prepare you to go through a time of persecution or tribulation that is completely pain-free for you. But at least these practices should help you to deal with that reality.
All right, that is great. Alex, I think that's a great place for us to stop. Although I do want to say, do you have any kind of closing thoughts on the topics, anything you'd like to leave the people with?
Yeah, let me just make this comment. I think that the last part that we talk about how to be ready is important. I hope that that everyone who's listening think about that and ask the question, so how can I get ready? It's a lot of fun to talk about politics. It's a lot of fun to talk about how can we improve our communities. That's a lot of fun. But let's take a few steps back and let's see the whole reality. And glory is coming. Eternity is coming. So let's zoom out a little bit and ask that question, how can I be prepared for that time? If it comes in my timeline, in my lifetime, how can I be prepared? I hope then this is just an encouragement for our people, and that I actually take specific steps towards that.
Awesome. Well, Alex, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank our listeners, whoever they may be,
Yes.
for joining us.
Yes.
And to remind them that we are going to be having these kinds of conversations every couple of weeks. And we'd love to hear from them. So post in the comments if you've got any questions, or if you want to challenge anything that Alex had to say today, feel free to do that as well.
Yes.
We love a good conversation. So have a great day, and thank you for joining us.